So first on the agenda after the pledge is approval of minutes, and you see the minutes from Rebecca from she sent the October 22nd. These are the minutes from December 6th. And so I'd ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Bourne seconds.
Second by Mr. Bourne. We'll call for the question and I'll track it. Rebecca's going to do the minutes from the recording. Mr. Bourne.
Bourne, yes.
Mr. Good.
Good, yes.
Mr. McCracken.
McCracken, yes.
Mr. Gamelke.
Gamelke, yes.
Perry, yes. Mr. Miharis.
Miharis, yes.
Mr.
Neal.
Neal.
Neil, yes.
Miss Allen.
Anderson, yes.
Oh, Anderson. Sorry.
Weatherford, yes.
Mr. Weatherford, thank you.
Get used to that.
I need to change it in my phone. That's the problem. All right. For the last meeting, for any financial payments that are part of the budget, for timing purposes, but with dual control, page 8 and 9, we have the payment to the admin for her work, and then on page 10, payment to the legal, our DBA attorney.
And they were approved.
Yeah.
They were
And so-
approved. So the one for Rebecca Allen for admin was for $200 and the one for the attorney was $362.50. I do have a request from Miss Allen. If on her invoices, she could put her name at the top instead of just saying company name, so we know who it's for.
Yes.
So
I
we could
agree.
ask her to change that.
Yeah, that was the first one, and that was that way. So she must have changed her QuickBooks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we just need to make sure that that's changed, so it has her name on it.
That sounds good. And so what we're doing here is actually entertaining a motion for ratification of the two expenses, since they've already been done. Mr. Bourne,
Bourne will move to ratify the expenses.
do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Neal, a second. All right, Mr. Bourne,
Bourne, yes.
Good, yes.
McCracken, yes. Gamelke, yes.
Perry, yes.
Miharis, yes.
Neil, yes.
Anderson, yes.
Weatherford, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then page 12.
Yes, if you look on page 12, we have a update on our budget. And when looking at that, you can see that we are still under budget. We are waiting for the final financial reports for last year. And we'll be able to update this again, but as of right now, this is where we are.
Yep. Thank you. Any questions on that? So the city will be closing out their end of year books, and then they'll provide us with the other reports that we've asked for. Oh, not sure, because one of the things I noticed is that it's, I believe it is. I believe it
Yeah, when he
is.
sent the email, I
Yeah.
think he said it was through December.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah.
Thank you, Miss Allen. I mean, Miss Anderson. I will get that. That's that. All right. So let's go ahead with under legal, page 13, it starts. And I kind of frame one of the reasons the packet was kind of put together late last night is we were waiting for feedback from our attorney, which we got late yesterday afternoon. And I also included, thank you, Karen, the city planners report to Planning Commission for Thursday, and we'll discuss that in a minute. But basically what we sent to the attorney, we asked the Tava group to think about the realistic rollout of development of this project. Obviously, phase one, they want to get the Tava restaurant going. And so this is how they broke out the phases. And then we asked them on page 14 to think about, okay, for default and remedy language to protect the city, the DDA, the public, like what are some potential conditions to put into the contract or an addendum to the contract? And so they proposed some money penalties at several different phases. And so we sent that to the attorney. Last week, apparently our attorney, Mr. Askin, got with the DDA or the Tava Group attorney, and they started discussing it. And I think the DDA attorney advocated for what would protect the DDA the most. And that is, hey, Tava Group, once you get the entitlement processes finished for all 4 phases and get through that process with planning and council, then we'll execute the contract. And obviously, if any developer out there or if the Tava Group is willing to do that, that protects the city to the utmost, right? They put in a lot of money, and then at the end, if it's approved, then maybe we'll do the contract with them, or we say we'll do the contract with them. Well, that wasn't in keeping with our discussions over the last 4, 5, 6 months. In terms of our real goal was to get a contract that struck that balance that was reasonable. And so the question is, is the DDA board, we are the governing body responsible for this property now. I believe that once we agree to a sales contract, it's going to have to be approved by city council. And so ultimately they will make the final decision, but I think, so the question is, of course, the attorney is going to come back in the best interest of the DDA and say, hey, let them spend all their money, let them get all the entitlement done, and then let's execute the contract. And I guess I'm going to ask, does that seem reasonable to the DDA board? Any questions, comments?
Yeah, I agree with it. I think that there should be markers hit before it's laid out. Anyway, that's what we're paying the attorney for.
Well, what do you agree with? What do you agree with?
I agree with getting the meeting the obligations prior to it, the signing of the contract. If that's the way we've done it in the past, which
I don't think we've done that. We haven't sold the property ever, so.
yeah, no, but I mean, as far as agreements, we've had yeah, honestly, I think it's prudent. I think we need to, our job is to represent the city, the citizens. And if the attorney feels that's the best course, then I would agree.
Let me clarify, the attorney did not think it was the best course. The attorney said that's the ultimate pathway to zero risk to the DDA.
Mhm.
Okay, so he didn't necessarily recommend that. It's our body to direct, finding the balance with the developer and what we want done. So any other comments? I mean, before I weigh in, I'd rather hear from you guys and the lady. Mr. Bourne.
That which is elucidated here. The goal that we have as a DDA board is the development of that particular piece of property in a productive manner that benefits also the city of Woodland Park and the environs and offers a economic opportunity for the developer. These are some of the ground rules at the very beginning. And there's a multiple of options that one could have. So I would tend to look at these as being relatively, acceptable. And as long as it's acceptable to the other side, then let's proceed.
And you're talking about just, and correct me if I'm wrong, page 14, some of the remedies that we're discussing seem
13 and
reasonable.
14, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
Mr.
it's a
Gamelki.
package, yeah.
I would agree that on page, that seems like it's all right there. I mean, they're definitely motivated to keep it going. There's, I mean, these are not little penalties if it doesn't happen, and we've already agreed to. If I remember right, they've agreed to buy the property and develop it and be responsible for it.
Mhm.
So they've already made that commitment to us. I just think that this is fine for me. Yeah.
Yeah, our challenge to them was, okay, beyond the commitment to buy it, we're concerned about getting to the end stage, and so that this was the first stab at some default remedy language. A commercial contract to actually execute. Mr. McCracken, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean. These remedies seem. Pretty fair to me. I think I think there's plenty of motivation. For them to commence in a timely manner. With these stipulations in place.
Mr. Miharis?
Recuse.
Yes, I'm sorry. Mr. Neal?
I have been scratching my head on this since we would be receiving $800,000 up front. I mean, the worst case scenario is they pay us $800,000 and they don't even get phase one completed. We get an additional $125,000 on top of the 800,000 and the land back, which sets us back to square one. For 20 years, we've been trying to get this developed. And now we have somebody that's willing to, we know that phase 1, 2, and 3 are pretty likely to go in. The question mark is the phase 4. So if we get phase 1, 2, 3 accomplished, and still, if they fail on phase 4, which would be the southern piece of the property, essentially we would get that back, as well as $125,000. That property by itself, the northern property, when the court case was decided, was assessed at about $230,000 by the judge.
Mhm.
So the southern property, which has much less value, 125,000 and the land back, I think is a very, very fair proposal for default language that would protect both the property owner and the citizens.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Mr. McCracken and what Rusty has said, and I feel that we chose this group from the very beginning because of their commitment that they gave us to this property. And I have not seen them default from that commitment, and I feel that we should continue through this process with them.
Mr.
Please.
Rutherford, do you want to weigh in or? Okay,
Hey, Tony, could I?
yeah, sure.
I'd just like to point out that when I said we've done that in the past, I was referring to the attorney's recommendations,
Mhm.
not a contract.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Good. Appreciate that clarification. Okay, so I guess, while we're on this topic, well, first of all, I will say, I will echo everyone else's comments that I agree. And, obviously, we're up here with our DDA hat on, and we have a responsibility. When I put myself into the developer's shoes, I agree that they've made a commitment. They've worked with us every step of the way. I have to, as a person that lives in kind of the market place, I guess, in my real world life job, I get frustrated a little bit with all these machinations we have to go through with government, but we have to. We are government. Remember that. We are a quasi-governmental entity up here. The only thing I will say is we need to get this done. We talked to them about executing the contract in August, and here we are in January of 2023, and it's not their fault. I think what is clear is if we approve a contract, then we send it on to city council and then they have the ultimate decision to approve, amend, or make other recommendations or reject, I guess. So I suggest we expeditiously as possible approve the contract. And I guess I would ask the concurrence of the board from a consensus to give clear direction to the attorneys to find this balance that's fair and equitable on both sides and get this thing going for the community. I don't know who you talked to, but I've had at least in the last year, 200 parties approach me and talk about when you guys gonna get this done. From my perspective, I'm a tad embarrassed as chair that we haven't gotten it done yet, frankly. That's just my perspective, but I also understand the processes we have to go through. So I guess, do I have a consensus for us to pound down with the attorneys, get that out to you for review, and then maybe even before the February meeting, have a quick meeting to just address this topic and maybe get the contract going?
I totally agree. I'm frustrated as well that it's taken this long.
Thank you. And we'll let the Tava group speak for themselves later on. Don't want to assume that. So the other thing we put in front of the attorney, we had 3 items. The second was, if you recall, Mr. Taylor had provided the DDA multiple emails from the former chair, meeting minutes from various DDA meetings where it was communicated that they were talking about a TIF deal that included real property and personal property. And it appears it appeared from myself and Mr. Neal's perspective that the contract, it looks like at the last minute, and according to Mr. Taylor, it was last minute where on the contract, they kind of drew in a carrot and basically said, excluding real property or excluding personal property. Of course, because what he was interested in was if he put in $200,000, let's say, of a car wash equipment, he wanted that included as part of the TIF deal. Well, the reality of it is he initialed that contract. And so, and I've talked to him about this, that my initial read was, that there may have been discussions at the DDA meeting. Yes, I see the email from Ms. Larson saying that it's going to be a TIF agreement with real and personal property. But in fact, the contract seems to just indicate real property. And even further, what you see on page 15 and 16 is cut and paste from the attorney from last night of his initial assessment of the contract. And he's taken it further, which will, since he's our attorney, we'll get with Mr. Vassalotti and provide him this information, because I think everything's copacetic with, we have not given a TIF deal as far as I know on the personal property. So I think we've met our obligation, but the attorney is going to want to verify that. But our initial answer, I think, back to Mr. Taylor, and he's not here today, is that it does appear that, he initialed off on the contract. It only includes the real property. And in fact, this is, he'll see this. I'll provide him a copy of this and he can digest it. And, as we know, all those discussions and meetings and emails, the contract should be the base document. That's what matters. And so he's not going to like the answer, and I understand it because of the spirit of where he thought he was negotiating from. But I think he would also admit that he probably shouldn't have initialed that change on the contract. So anyway, so any questions on that? Yes, Ms.
I have a
Anderson.
question. We should make these special add-ons for personal property in a TIF deal, because that's not what the TIF is really about. The TIF is about, re-beautifying our town. And so
I'm not comfortable in having these one-off deals with different people. I think it should be the same for everybody.
Yeah, the template is pretty much the same. I think there is license for that to be included. I don't know how it's been treated, dissected, but I agree. I mean, the bottom line here is, I think it was fair for Mr. Taylor to ask the question because he remembered the conversations. But I think he would also acquiesce to the fact that he initialed the contract and it is what it is. So he may not be happy, but I think our attorney kind of validated our perspective and our read of the contract. So any other comments, questions?
Yeah, and it would be great if he'd show up and talk. I think that would help clarify a lot, but as I recall, that the personal property may have been involved since that at the time was determined to be a lion's share of the expenses. The car wash equipment is hugely expensive, and that's where it was all coming from. So I'm not saying that that's the way it was done, but I think that definitely need to look deeper into it.
Well, the attorney did. That's what we did here. We asked the attorney to look at the contract. And I agree. The DDA had discussions. Mary Jo sent an email alluding to the fact that would be included, but it wasn't in the contract. So the contract is the contract. And so I would say the moral of the story yet again is let's make sure that we establish all the protocols, the boundaries and clear communication with any future TIF applicants and make it clear that while we're in discussions, especially since we're doing it publicly, they're just discussions. And then once we narrow down on the contract, that's what the DDA approves and that's what the other party accepts potentially. So.
Yeah, and Jerry, just so you understand, it's what happened. Tony had read it and had an opinion. He sent me a text or an email asking me to read the contract and all the documents around it for my opinion. I thought it was crystal clear. The contract was limited to the real property. The emails are separate and never got incorporated. There's no document that's signed as a legal contract. So I rendered the opinion, I think it appears that it's limited to the real property. Let's go ahead and send it to the attorney. He then went through it and said, yes, as of right now, it is limited to the real property, just so you know the sequence.
I guess I didn't realize, I remember the conversation about it. It was
Right.
pretty intense. And I guess I assumed that it was included in the contract.
It was not.
No, but another couple of things to Mr. Taylor. So he did try to come to December's meeting, but the last meeting he attended was our first meeting where we tried it at night and it failed miserably. So he showed up at 7:30 that night. And then I don't know if he got the memo on the change to the 10th, if we would have had the meeting on the 3rd, we had nothing to really talk about because we hadn't heard from the attorneys yet. So that's why we moved it to the 10th. So anyway, so I think it's pretty clear. The attorney seems to validate the contract. And then we also followed through and we told Mr. Taylor that we would check with legal as well, just to make sure that we were interpreting it right. And I think we have. And so we'll report back to Mr. Taylor. And then now it looks like our attorney wants to finish up the process, of course, with making sure that how we're handling the TIF with the city is in fact how the contract states, which I think it is based on what I think. So.
And Jerry, out of fairness, I think the message was conveyed back to him. We made the determination on what's on the DDA files, what we have and the memory stick. We offered, if you have something that's signed or countersigned that we don't have, we would take that into consideration. That was conveyed to them also, that we're open if there's any proof that it extended to the personal property, we would reconsider that.
Yeah.
And yeah, Mr. Taylor provided me with probably 13 documents that had allusions, but nothing that was contractual in my opinion. So, okay. Yeah,
Mr.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, from, we'll say, I guess that this has gone on in the past is that TIF funds are public funds. The things that Taylor Mountain did have a benefit to the general public, but they do not, and I think it's a slippery slope if we get to doing personal property, because we don't need to finance cash registers, tables, chairs, countertops, all of that kind of stuff. Those are the tools of the business. We've taken public funds and enhancing the environment of which our town involves. So stormwater, that's an enhancement, and it's a safety. Street construction, that was a distinct enhancement. Sewer extension, distinct enhancement on a public standpoint. Same way with the electrical going from overhead to underground, that is a public enhancement. Car wash equipment, that's a tool of the trade. And that's not subject to this. Yeah.
And I think one clarification, if you look at our TIF application, it's, I think you hit it right on with the public improvements, some of the infrastructure that benefits the city. But I think where it gets a little iffy and drawing the line is when you're talking about architectural enhancements and landscaping are the two items specifically called out
Yeah.
as reimbursable in our, or considerable in our TIF application. And so that's where, what you have to look at. And I think that's where we need to kind of focus our efforts, is defining that line.
And I think a person can also reflect comfortably if we do architectural enhancements, that has a public component to it also. If you put in just a straight gray pummy block building versus a markedly enhanced, that enhances the visual attractiveness for the entire region. And that could be looked at as very favorably, I think.
Yeah, especially with one of our parts of our mission to address any blight kind of situations in the district. So
Yeah.
I agree. So that leads perfectly into page 17. So on the agenda, it's listed as TIF agreement or reimbursement agreement. We're going to kind of tie it in to AJ's because they signaled they were going to submit one. And again, I go back to what we provided them was the TIF application that Mr. Bourne and Ms. Carrick had put together at a previous board. And I think it's a great starting point. And I agree that there are some areas that we can probably tighten up for sure. So with respect to the TIF reimbursement agreement itself, the third legal point was in 2023 is our current TIF template still relevant, valid? Does it need to be adjusted? And so we kind of asked the attorney to look at that. And also we had a discussion which was specific to the potential AJ application, which they just submitted today. And we won't go through that because we just got it. But basically, with respect to AJ's, and correct me on anything if I'm wrong, I think we had a consensus, a complete consensus that we were interested in helping and participating with them if we could find a way. And so to your point, Mr. Bourne, to the TIF kind of guidelines with the spirit of it checking a lot of the boxes, and that being taking the shut down Pizza Hut building, doing significant renovations to it architecturally, but they're coming at the last minute. So some of the things in speaking, Mr. Neal and I with the attorney, is the question is, do they have their CO yet? And the answer is no. And I think that's a good thing, because I think what we have to be careful of here is whatever we do here, we want to make sure we don't open the barn door for everyone in town who's done some improvement to come back and ask for a TIF deal retro. But this still is in process. So I think check. And the one thing they mentioned that stood out to me that Mr. Mihalis says isn't in here yet
Mhm.
They put their budget in here, but they were required by the city to put in some infrastructure improvements, I think, to water, sewer, those kind of things. And so I think from just my perspective and talking with the attorney, the cost of those public improvements is maybe all we're talking about here. Is one, the CO isn't in yet. And yes, they did some architectural nice things to the building, but they probably redid the kitchen. Again, to your point, Mr. Bourne, that's kind of the cost of doing business. They were gonna do that anyway. And so maybe what they didn't initially anticipate in their budget was the cost of those public improvements, which adds value to the public. And so I think from my perspective and considering the application, that's the number I'm really interested in. And potentially there's some delta between the value at acquisition, post-construction, eligible for reimbursement, ? I think that is the gray area that Mr. Maharis talked about. The value of the appearance of that building today versus where it was a year ago is dramatic and improves the highway, improves the city, improves the downtown district. And so is there some value there? To me, that's a harder number to figure out because it is in a gray area. Again, it appears to meet the mission of rehabbing properties within the district, especially, you could consider that pizza blighted because every day it goes by, it's going to get more and more deteriorated if it isn't taken care of. And then I think more importantly with this, we have I think a really good application. I think we have good kind of parameters around benefit to the public. I think we need to do some work in the future on that question of the gray area of architectural improvements. Maybe tighten this up just a little bit more. And I think then we'll be ready possibly. For instance, I know of an applicant that may come in if Talbot breaks ground. I have a party that's told us that they probably will start their process. And we may, the planning or the city, the planning may require some additional architectural features that they wouldn't normally do. And that just like on Tractor Supply. And I think that's fair game for that delta in the gray area. So I think two things. One, the attorney's gonna tell us whether the template for the TIF reimbursement agreement is still valid. And I agree that probably real property should be taken off the table if it's in there. And I've read it so much, I don't even remember. I've read all of them so much, but two, with respect to AJs, we need to get the number for the public improvements for us to properly consider, I think. And we'll ask Mr. Maharis to suss that out for us. And then I think three, we'll be ready to possibly discuss the TIF agreement for them and execute on it. But I think not having the CO before we execute and getting those public improvement numbers is probably the two main factors. Any other thoughts from board members?
I still think there's a question on the value of removal of the existing, abandoned building for improvement architecturally and how we define that as a board. I think we need to look at that, whether it's looking at architectural finishes and considering a portion of that, or I just like to have a guideline that we can be consistent moving forward throughout.
Agreed. Well, I guess what I would say to that matter, if the board can think about it and individually, just an email to probably myself and Mr. Neal as the secretary, give any ideas around that, some ideas about that so that we could accelerate the process for creating some more boundaries there. I think that'd be helpful. You probably, contractors, builders will probably add more value, developers. So if you can shoot us those ideas, we'll get them coalesced and shoot them back out through Rebecca Allen. And maybe we can come to that boundary decision pretty quickly because we don't want to delay yet again, their application now that we have it, so.
Well, and I think their application needs that definition, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can use this as the process to develop a more consistent standard
Yeah,
as we move forward.
and the third part of that ask, or the next part of that is ask the board that we need to make sure that. I always think about fair, consistent, explainable. If the next party that's in process or. It's just complete, I think, there's we just need to define to make sure, so if someone comes to us after they've started a project, make sure we have that nailed down so we can be consistent with that.
Yes.
Do we have like a, when they get their application, is there like a format or a list that shows them, this is what qualifies? and
That's
this
in
is-
here.
There's, yeah, they do get guided a little bit
Yeah,
to the
okay.
process.
Yeah, that is the application. Again, that was great, in my opinion, great work by Mr. Bourne and Ms. Garrett. Anyway, so I think the message to AJ's is we're working on this. Now we have your application, get us the public improvements numbers. We have to wrestle with that delta on the aesthetics of what they've done with their building and whether that has value or we can attribute some value. And then the attorney will finish up with a new template for TIF agreements based on those kind of parameters. And then I think we can be more expeditious in making a decision for them.
So what if they get their certificate of occupancy before this? Because I know they want to open. Last time we were here, they wanted to be open by now, but driving by, I can see
They're still working on the interior. I
Yeah.
will ping them and get a date and send that out to everyone.
but
they're
if this
targeting.
deal doesn't go through before then does that make all this null and void?
Is it the application submittal or is it the?
We have to decide that. I mean, that's the hard part because I think the CO for an in-process project, I think the CO not being done is an important component. And I think the attorney agrees as well. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think that was the point I was stressing, that they need to get this application, whatever they're asking for prior to the CO, because I think of it as, if we open the barn doors, the CO puts a fence around the outside of the barn, so the horses can't go too far, because if there's no corral, like a CO being the limiter,
Yeah.
we're opening ourselves up to.
I'm hesitant to even as far as we have opened it up to what can happen, mean,
So I think it would be applicable for me to talk to them. And number one, we've already discussed separating out. I think all they have is storm sewer and sidewalk as far as public improvements on that project. So that's an easy one for them to separate out. The other aspect would be to have them focus on what we can determine now would be considered as architectural components, whether it's just purely the cost of the external architectural components of the building, the deck, the beams, the rock facing, those aspects. I think that makes the most sense to get us something back quickly that works everything.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, they don't even have to get the everything request in, but at least get a preliminary application in prior to.
Well, and that's, they've provided that today, but I don't think that their
So this
budgeting
is
analysis, yeah,
Right.
I don't
Okay.
think their budgeting analysis
Got it.
lines up with what we consider.
I was unaware that that's what it was. I
Yeah.
wasn't here. at the
It's
time.
towards the end.
Okay, got
So,
it.
so again, if we have maybe, if we have an interim meeting before February to on the TAVA contract, we can address this at that time, but it helps by getting as much input as possible. So we can get this nailed down, get those boundaries established, get it signed off on by the attorney and be ready to move forward potentially. Okay. So, and yes, Mr. Gamelki, I think, publicly we're stating that Mr. Miharis will definitely communicate to him that I think the attorney, this board probably thinks that not having CO yet is important, so time is of the essence. Okay, so chair report, two things there. One, I've thrown in here from Karen, our city planner. The staff report remember, we submitted a text amendment change that has to go through city planning and the city council. And essentially, the text amendment change was just removing the requirement that residential can only be on the second and third floors, and that commercial had to be on the first floor. Because in phase 4, for the potential residential, and this is relevant to Tava too, because if they believe that the market is saying that phase 4, that residential is the thing that will work, if that text amendment isn't removed by city council, then David Weekley walks away, future residential walks away, and then we're stuck with figuring out how to make that property work for just commercial or commercial residential up above. So what I'm asking, I haven't really had a chance because I'm not used to reading government speak too much. So I've gone through it a couple of times and was scratching my head a little bit. So I'll get with Ms. Mickey and kind of get her to help me understand a few pieces. But I'm asking all board members that could show up Thursday at 6:30. Looks like we're part B on put together a presentation to supplement the staff report from our perspective, and then move through the process. So I think there's some interesting elements in terms of intent from various parties. So I think we're going to have to walk through that with Planning Commission and the City Council. So if you can show up, that'd be great, just for support, moral support. Talking to I finally looked up who's on Planning Commission right now, and I think I know a few of those folks, but anyway.
That's this Thursday, right?
Yes, sir.
This Thursday.
This Thursday, the 12th. Okay, so I'm not going to go through that any further because again, I think it requires a lot of reading. It's pretty good. Meeting logistics 6B on page 18. So we're working really hard, and I take responsibility for the city has graciously given us access now to the second part of their system. So now we have the ability to train Rebecca Allen to post our agendas and also post our meeting packets. The chair's goal is to have the meeting agenda posted and the packet by the 25th of every month. And then we'll put some training materials out to the board so that you can see where you can access it. I think Rebecca will still send it to you via email, but you can also look at the website and we'll show you where to look at it. And then we also, the meeting packet for today is already up on our website under DDA documents, meetings, today's date. You can see today's meeting packet, but we're going to get better at this logistics thing, and we'll figure out the Zoom credentials thing to make sure that's a little bit more elegant moving forward. So
Last night when I tried to access that, it said that site, that page was unavailable.
yeah, it was for me, but I don't know. I don't know. So we'll, again, I call that legit. We have to work out. It could be, it's a PDF, so I don't know. We still have some things to work through, but the city has been very gracious with their time, effort, and resources to help us get a little bit more independent. Okay. So, Woodland Station update, Tava. Whatever you would like to share with us.
Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here.
I don't know if our Zoom is working.
Our Zoom isn't working.
Okay.
Oh,
I am here. This is Ryan Lloyd at Echo Architecture.
thank you.
So just a few things real quick, because we didn't all of this the last month. We've had several meetings with the city about the entitlement process that we're going to be walking through here. It's been very helpful to give us a timeline and a process to do that. Ryan will speak to that. We also, we are still waiting on the bid from Matrix for the updated phase 2. We were supposed to have it yesterday, still haven't seen it yet. I guess it'll be the end of this week. But we'll be able to have that show you who, what parties, what parcels are involved. And then we can make a decision about any kind of cost sharing. If you want. There anything else? Just the contract, and you guys already discussed that. We would like to nail that down, get that in process so we can set a closing date. That would be very helpful. Ryan, do you want to add anything as to your process, entitlements, that sort of thing?
Sure. Yeah, we've been working with Karen at planning, and she did get us the kind of path to entitlements and approvals through city zoning. So we have a better understanding of what we need for that. We've been released by our client, the owners, to move forward with construction documents, which we are doing. They are optimistically hoping to be open in the spring, late spring of 2024. So we are moving in that direction. It's aggressive and potentially optimistic, but if we don't do it, it'll be a lot later than that. So moving forward on construction documents, moving forward on zoning documents, getting soils tested. That is about where we're at. But yeah, really just trying to dial in the scope of phase one and get it drawn up and get it in front of the city and out to the building department and start construction. That's the goal.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah.
So as DDA chair and after speaking with our attorney, I have to ask, is the developer open to doing all the entitlement work, going through the whole process, getting all those things paid for, done, and then we close?
We'll certainly look at it, but we also got to have a conversation with our lender, see how that affects that process. They may want us to actually own the property first, and then as we get through all the process of entitlement, we can do that later. We thought it would be best if we acquired the property with all the amendments of the contract, timelines, penalties, all that, so that we can obtain it, that satisfies our lender, that gets going with all the processes for the financing, rather than wait. I mean, the entitlement could take a lot of months. And we thought it would be better for both parties that we go ahead and acquire the property.
Well, taking my DDA hat off, putting my banker hat on, no way. I would want you to, as a banker, want you to own the property. Unless you just want to spend all your own personal money first, so. And some of those expenses coming up are pretty significant, so. Anyway, DDA hat back on, okay, well, I had to ask because obviously that's the safest for the DDA. It's, you know, that's an easy thing for this. We wait until you have it all approved and then we can do the contract. Okay. Well, the only other question is, you know, we obviously still have a lot of discussion. We have to come together with the initial contract. I cannot anticipate, or we cannot anticipate city council's take on all this. They may have a whole different perspective than this board. And so in thinking through all the logistics, one of the things I thought about was, you know, if push came to shove, I guess theoretically, we could break down the contract into 4 components and execute on getting the pin set for the Tava property so that the Tava project can start its process. And then the second, then the third, then the fourth. My perspective as a citizen, as a business citizen, as a DDA board member is you guys committed to the whole deal. We want you to get the whole deal done, piecemealing it. We're back to, you know, who knows what it's going to end up being at the end. So any thoughts on that? In terms of would this DDA board, be open to doing it in phases in terms of selling the property?
I don't think so.
I would rather go with the option of the default language, we sell it in total. With the default language that has been offered, because that provides a lot of revenue. Upfront and future and the land back if they fail versus. The perpetual trying to slice it and dice it, we never know what we're gonna get, so
Right.
I know I would support.
Are we, because I'm seeing kind of
Yeah,
shaking.
I agree with
heads.
that. Yeah.
Mr. Good?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, simple. Thank you. So we're gonna work really hard and we may call an interim meeting. If in fact we can come to an agreement on what we think is a contract so that the board can. Assess and vote.
Vote on moving it forward to city council.
Correct. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, board discussions items on the, not on the agenda. I know we have one with Mr. Gamelki.
We had another meeting with NETCO, the fire department. It was actually a really good meeting. Eric Stone was there for this one. The fire department is looking for more money for more staff. And so they're looking for, they need, they're saying that it's about $90,000 a year for each staff member. Right now, they're 6 people short. We talked about possibly an impact fee on rooftops, things like that, a one-time fee on new developments. That's really small, those small potatoes. Eric Stone brought up the fact that there's some congressional funding, that there's a lot of money out there that they're giving away for stuff like that, that the fire department would qualify for. And so he actually made a phone call when we were there and is trying to set up a meeting with some of the staffers and to see if we can get some money for the fire department. They want like a ladder truck, which is new, is about $1.5 million. And they're looking for a training tower, which is $750,000. And so those are 2 things that they're looking for. We talked about possibly if they, so I know that there's a commercial income tax, the taxes are going up. And so their base income is going to go up some. They're not exactly sure how much, but they think it might even go up about 30%. So that might help them with some of their staffing shortage. We talked about the TIF. We, as this group, has talked about possibly relaxing their TIF agreement or, giving back some of that money. We just need to make sure that we could cover ourselves, our debt, before we could do something like that, obviously. But it was a really good meeting. There was a lot of ideas thrown around that were very helpful, especially having Eric Stone there. He seems to know where a lot of that money could be that the fire department could access. So that's about it.
Yeah, Mr. Stone is one of our county commissioners.
Yeah.
So I will just add one more, by the way. When we asked the attorney to look at the TIF reimbursement template agreement moving forward, we asked him to put language in there excluding the district monies that would have gone to fire district. So, I mean, that we would have taken from the fire district. Essentially, we, as a consensus, I think we basically said any future TIF deal, we would exclude the monies from the fire district in terms of our collection from the county. So I assume we're still on the same page there. And then also, he's going to look at from a DDA perspective of, we have to pay our bonds, we have to meet our obligation with the city on the land. And then we have to make sure we have operating monies to obviously pay the TIF agreements that we've agreed to. And then he's looking at if we have excess after that, how we possibly can potentially allocate back to the fire district if we chose to once a year, once we know all the end of year numbers. So that's all in play in terms of just gathering data for us to consider. Okay. Good. Anything from the audience or anything else on items not on the agenda?
No.
Okay, anything from the audience? Very quiet out there. All right, well, we were 5 minutes over and we got started.
We
10
did pretty
minutes
good
late.
today.
So, thank you, everyone. And do we have a consensus that if we call a meeting maybe 2 weeks from now, we'll make an effort to attend? And it would be to address the TAVA contract and potentially the AJ's TIP application if we have all the info we need.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
Okay, otherwise, the next meeting is February 6th, I believe. And we'll have those agenda out and pack it out much sooner than normal, I promise. And other than, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second, and
quick.
I tried.
Aye.
Be a second.
Thank you.
And it is February 7th.
It's February 7th. Thank you, Mr. Newman.
Oh, 7?
Yeah.
Yeah.